In the beginning, there is no throne, no crown, no royal name carved into stone. There is only heat, wind, and a thin green ribbon of water that makes the desert pause. This story starts before pharaohs, before pyramids, before Egypt feels inevitable. It begins with ordinary people choosing a new kind of life, one season at a time. Picture a landscape that looks empty until you learn how to read it. A low shoreline, reeds, and shallow water that appears and retreats like something alive. Along that shifting edge between sand and water, people begin to change their habits. Not suddenly, not with one invention, just a slow decision to stop moving the way their grandparents moved. They learn a dangerous lesson. Staying can be smarter than roaming, but staying also means you can lose everything when the timing turns against you. The desert does not forgive mistakes, yet the river offers a bargain. Learn my rhythm, and I will feed you. To predict a river, you need memory, elders who remember which floods were kind, which were cruel, and which arrived late. And you need storage, because a harvest isn't food until it survives the months after it. So the first power in this story is not a weapon. It is a pit in the ground, lined, sealed, and hidden, built to keep grain dry from moisture, insects, and hungry eyes. Now shift west of the river into the Fayum. Not a city, not a capital, an oasis that feels like geography's private secret. Here, life bends around lakes and marsh edges, fishing, grazing, planting, adapting. When archaeologists later open the ground, they don't find palaces, they find work, planning, and caution. Hundreds of storage pits appear, not glamorous but decisive, because pits mean surplus, and surplus means choices. Surplus means a family can survive a bad month. It also means envy, theft, and the first people who begin to count what others have. Every revolution has a quiet ledger behind it. Here, the ledger is grain. The year moves in a rhythm, waiting as the river rises, then silt spreading like dark promise, then the retreat when the land reappears soft and ready. That is when decisions become physical, where to plant, how much to risk, and what happens if the flood is weak. Farming along the Nile is not only labor, it is gambling against a calendar you cannot fully control. So communities build small habits that change everything. Flint sickles cut grain cleanly, and clay containers seal food away from time. What they don't leave behind is just as important. No grand tombs, no stone monuments, because they are still investing most of their strength into survival and staying put. Their food shows the transition too. Fish from the lakes, animals kept close, living wealth that can multiply and be traded. Then the larger question arrives, the one that follows agriculture everywhere. Did the idea begin here or travel in? The grains point outward toward the Levant, where wheat and barley had long histories. But importing a crop is not importing a civilization. The Nile forces its own rules. This river is a pulse, not rainfall. Farming here becomes the craft of reading water, and planning becomes heavier because one bad flood can unravel a year. That pressure creates inventory. Inventory creates counting, and counting creates the first arguments about ownership. At first it's simple, my pit, my grain, my family. But as pits multiply, so do the questions: where fields begin, how water is shared, what to do when one household has plenty and another has none. Reputation guides decisions early on, but reputation becomes currency once it matters, and currency invites competition. Widen the lens, because the Fayum is not alone. Along the Nile, other communities rise, each adapting differently, each leaving a different trace. Repeated paths begin to connect them. Early trade routes that turn strangers into occasional partners. Trade brings new materials and new ideas, but it also brings comparison, and comparison sharpens ambition. To the north, villages like Merimda endure. Staying for generations changes psychology. You build for memory, not just today. Then a quiet shift appears. Storage becomes more private, pit by pit, household by household. Private storage hints that property is hardening into a rule. And once property hardens, differences follow. Some households get better at the rhythm, gather more animals, build stronger trade ties, and slowly rise. Move forward toward the Badarian culture, where graves begin to speak. Burials often feel restrained, suggesting a society not built primarily on constant warfare, at least not yet. But restraint isn't simplicity. Craftsmanship shows care, and shared ritual begins to bind people beyond survival. Then comes Nakada, where the pattern intensifies. More trade, more symbols, more stratification, and clearer signs that leadership is becoming visible. Long-distance goods reveal networks, and networks create gatekeepers. If you control access, you gain wealth, and wealth starts to look like authority. Over generations, negotiation becomes hierarchy, hierarchy becomes expectation, and expectation becomes early governance, even before anyone dares to call it a state. Elites appear in the record without announcing themselves. Goods cluster in certain graves. Fine materials concentrate in certain hands. Uneven distribution becomes the fingerprint of a stratified society. With stratification comes tension. Complexity can coordinate big projects, but it also produces conflict, because power invites resistance, and scarcity invites theft. Through all of it, the river keeps pulsing. The Nile remains the engine, predictable miracle and unpredictable risk. Those who master its rhythm gain leverage over neighbors and over time, and stability reshapes thought. When not everyone must chase food daily, some specialize: potters, tool makers, traders, ritual experts. Specialization increases output, output increases exchange, and exchange increases complexity. Complexity demands rules, and rules demand rule makers. Civilization forms without one dramatic moment, not a switch flipped by a king, but small solutions stacking into a system. Look back at those storage pits in the Fayum. They are proof that people began thinking in seasons ahead, not only days ahead. Thinking in seasons ahead is the mental architecture of administration. Plan, allocate, reserve, enforce. Enforcement starts soft, custom, pressure, reputation, then hardens into institutions. Once institutions exist, identity changes. People begin to see themselves as part of a larger river world connected by shared symbols that travel faster than armies. Trade widens the imagination. Shells, stones, pigments from far away whisper that the world is larger than your footsteps, and leaders learn the decisive skill, not just farming or fighting, but coordination across households. Coordination builds canals, organizes storage, mobilizes labor. It turns scattered settlements into something that can outlast droughts and rivals. By the time dynastic Egypt appears, it will look sudden in hindsight, but the stage was built slowly by farmers, villagers, artisans, traders, and early elites who never expected their names to survive. So don't start with a king. Start with a floodline on a rock, seeds saved for next season, grain protected through the night. Because the first empire is not built by monuments. It is built by logistics, by storage, coordination, and the quiet discipline of people who chose to stay and made the river work for them. If you watch us, it means you're growing with us.